Brothers and sisters, we're going to start our Q&A session with Dr. Wayung and Dr. Agus. I would like to open with my question. But why? Why so many Asian theologians is still like very Western oriented? Why, Dr. Wayung? Can you explain to all of us about that?
I would say mangoes or bananas. And if you read the book, you understand. You can find the book in Amazon.com. And the two fruits are very simple. Mangoes is yellow on the outside, but also yellow on the inside. It's Asian completely. Whereas banana is yellow on the outside, but putih on the inside.
Okay.
And that leads to your question. Why is it that many of us Asian scholars are still thinking in a very Western way? The first answer is very simple. All of us, no exception, we either started reading textbooks written by Western scholars, and many of us went on to Britain or America, Australia, Germany to do our doctorates, masters and doctorates. And so we are all taught by Western scholars. And Asians are very loyal to their teachers. So what the guru says, we must—
the ultimate truth.
That was our truth. So we must repeat it. That's the first thing. So I think that's the first major problem. The second problem is partly because of the Western teachers themselves. The Western teachers, even to this day, most of them do not understand Asia or Africa or Latin American Christianity. They only look at theology from the West. So they are still talking largely in those terms, right? But unfortunately, this is where things are. Many of them are still stuck in the West. And that's why Professor Andrew Waugh says Western theology is actually a very contextual theology. I want to come up one more point, which is very important. And it's this: you see, most of us grew up, as we were growing up, we were very influenced by Western culture, isn't it? You go to YouTube, all the Americans or the British are singing, right? You go and see cinema, got some nice Indonesian film, but most of the important films are all Western films, right? You follow me?
Yes.
Who is the big geopolitical power? Is America now fighting China? Last time you used America fighting Russia, and then it's the Dutch who were your colonial masters, etc. You see, we all grow up with a mindset, unconscious. The West is the abang, the big brother, the uncle. Yes. They are clever, they know more. And we, from Asia or Africa, not many of us have the confidence or the courage to speak up. So even when we don't feel it's right, we don't know how to express it. We don't have the confidence. So during my 4 years studying in Britain, in UK, doing my bachelor's and my master's, I actually felt very, very upset, but I did not express it. I was actually in a sort of depression. I felt it wasn't right. I was studying good theology, but I just didn't know what was wrong. Something was wrong somewhere. So it took me many years slowly to work it through, to begin to have the confidence to speak up and to have the conviction to speak up. So I think one of the big problems, the challenge we in Asia face is that we suffer under a lack of confidence. So my challenge to those of you who are listening is this: do not be afraid to make the God Christianity your own Indonesian Christianity. And that's why Agus could say there's a lot of homework to be done. A lot of homework. True. You and I have a lot of homework to do. But we must be willing to spend the time, do the homework, and then speak up.
Yes.
I want to say to you, the Western Christians are actually looking to us now, because if you look at the West, Christianity in the West is going downhill. They are looking for answers. Some of them still think that they got all the answers, but many of the more thoughtful Christians in the West are looking for answers. And we must do our part to provide answers. That's I hope I've answered your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Wayung. Okay, please, Dr. Sarina.
We have so many questions here. I try to categorize them in terms of more conceptual and then practical. And here what we have, we start from the more conceptual first. Do you think dualism is all bad? I'm thinking how much our medical world has been benefited from the dualistic thinking of science that bring us objective measurable invention, like the new drug, including vaccine COVID-19. Do you think is there a place of dualistic thinking in our approach to mission? Or in other words, in what ways this kind of Western education or this kind of dualistic thinking might be a help to develop an Asian context of theology and mission?
Yeah, let me try to answer. The first thing is that we need to acknowledge that dualistic thinking is there. So we can see it's from the positive side or negative side. It's always, it is there. So we need to study about the positive and negativity of that approach. But what, as Christian, I think what the Bible teaches us is about holistic thinking. It's very wholesome, holistic. Because if you see and learn about the Genesis text, we see that at the beginning, it is holistic, right? We have nature, we have man, we have animal, plants and everything. So it is very holistic. I don't want to judge the dualistic view, but I see there are so many negativity that comes from that thinking. It separates us, and it also damages Christianity, actually. You know, when there is a pietistic movement, pietism movement, it separates very, very large Christianity to become, one is very spiritual, and the other is very not spiritual. So they neglect all the things that is not spiritual. It damaged the Christianity. When we feel the problem until today. And also, it also happened to me also, because I studied my first bachelor. I was studying under the seminary that was influenced so much by pietism at the time. So it is embedded in my thought and my life also until today. And the churches, especially maybe a lot of churches, I don't want to mention which churches, but a lot of churches in Indonesia still in that situation. So the dualism that they have will separate between what is spiritual, what is not spiritual. Then it damages Christianity as a whole, and damages also the action to move forward. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to understand about ourselves actually. As Asian, we are actually given the situation and the condition that is very perfect for understanding ourselves as Christian. Because I want to say something about the first question. The inferiority complex is there in us, in our thinking. So you see, if you watch the Jesus movie, all the actors as stars are from Western, right? From America. Can you imagine if they come from Asia, from maybe
Korean?
Nobody will look at it, right? Because we are thinking that the Western is better than us. So that's the problem, I think. Inferiority complex, that this is the homework we need to understand that from the beginning, for me, Bible is very holistic. So we understand that there are so many advancements that coming from this Western side of theology and technology, but we need to understand that it's only part of it, our lives. It is not the whole of our lives. It's only helping us in parts of our lives, not the whole life of ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wayung, do you have any response for that?
No, I think I agree with Dr. Agus when he says that the Bible is very holistic, and I think that's where we must start. But can I go back to the question? I think the person who asked the question may have confused what I said. I talk about two things. I talk about, on the one hand, the dualism, which goes back to the Greeks, Plato. Then I talk about the Western Enlightenment, which started in Europe in the 16th and 17th century. Yeah. He's mixing up the two. I think the dualism is a problem. And I think the dualism is Greek, is not biblical. Like Pa Agus say, our Bible is holistic. Why should we bring in? What happened was that the early church brought dualism into the church, and that corrupted all our theology. All I'm saying is that we need to get rid of it. Now, the problem that he was raising is, however, he's speaking about the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment has many good sides to it. The Enlightenment has both a positive side and a negative side. What is good about Enlightenment is science, mathematics, good thinking, rational thinking. And that's what he was talking about. The questioner says that it's good for our modern science, Without Enlightenment thinking, we'll all be dead with COVID, because we don't have the vaccine. Now at least we are getting a vaccine, So the Enlightenment has many good sides to it. But the Enlightenment created two problems, at least among other, the number of problems. One was the supernatural. They rejected the whole supernatural. The other thing is that if you study Enlightenment properly, what they call modernity rejects any truth, religious truth or ethical, moral truth. That's a problem with Enlightenment. But I don't want to go into that. That's a big issue. That's a big discussion. But if you want to understand why, for example, many Westerners say, oh, nothing wrong, LGBT is okay, homosexual is okay, etc. is okay, it's because the Enlightenment has taught that there's no such thing as moral truth. True. It's your opinion. You like to be a gay, fine. You like to be a homosexual, that's fine. You like to divorce your husband, fine. There's no morality. It's a matter of choice, that's all.
Yeah.
So that's an issue of Enlightenment. So I think, coming back to your question is, don't mix up the two issues about the Enlightenment, which I raised, and the dualism one. All I'm saying that both affected Western theology badly.
This is very interesting. Now we come to the follow-up question. I think it's very much related. This question said, while in the West reject the supernatural, for example, a demon-possessed case, the East, many of us may perceive that everything is demonized. We have prayer to exorcise the spirit of laziness, the spirit of adultery, the spirit of greed, so on and so forth. Is there a middle way to address this issue? Go ahead, Dr. Hua or Dr. Agus want to go first.
I think the answer is not finding the middle way. I think it's better to see the holistic way, not the middle way. Yeah. We are not trying to make a peace for these two sides of thinking, but we need to make a holistic and comprehensive view of things. So when I studied my doctorate degree, I was in the Western institutions. I find out also that this is the problem with the Western teachers, because they will look for the books from the literature from the Western sides also. When I raise a question about what is happening in Asia, especially in my situation, for them it is very hard to understand actually. They cannot get it when I say something like that, because they are talking about corruption. It's easy for them just to say corruption, no corruption at all. But the problem is, the problem of corruption, it is like a web, a spider web. So it's related to not just one single action that we need to do, but there are so many things that we need to do to erase the corruption in our society. So because it is intertwined over there, so that's a problem. But those Western teachers, because they never live in Asia, in Indonesia, for example, they cannot understand how massive it is, how intertwined it is, and how difficult it is. They just draw from the Bible, and theologians say you cannot do it, and post-stop, and then I think they really don't answer the situation. And the other things about the Western theologians, the problems of the Western theologians they have is that some of them, I think, they look down to Asian because of the colonialization and imperialism if we've been only 50 years or 60 years from this situation. So if you study history, you see that the concept is like that the Asians, they are good for nothing, they are very lazy, they are and everything. So I think that's what the situation. And also some of them, not all of them, they will think Asian is crazy. So many of my friends will say that Asian is crazy. You are crazy. You can do something unthinkable and and something.
Out of the box.
But it's good that now they think that Asian is rich. So there's a film, the Asian,
Crazy Rich Asian.
That's the situation now. So I think Asian, especially China now, rising up as one of the biggest power in the world, that there is a shifting of thinking about Asian. And I think it's also over there in theology.
I think the problem is the West went from a period where they completely ignore the supernatural. They don't accept demons, they don't accept all this. Then what happened was that they were forced to deal with it. I'm talking about it within the church. Within the church. They were forced to deal with it when the charismatic movement became strong in the West, especially from the 1960s and 70s onwards. So the charismatic movement became very strong in America, in Britain, etc. And when they became strong, they were forced to deal with it. And some of the people like Peter Wagner from Fuller, for example, he grew up, he had worked in Latin America, he saw some of these things. And then he began to write as a typical Western scholar. They try to fit everything into a scheme. And you read Peter Wagner, I don't know how many of you read him. He tends to go on an extreme. You follow me or not? For example, he says, you must find out who the ruler demon is over Indonesia. You fight him in. Once the ruler demon is got rid of, everybody in Indonesia become Christian. Basically, that's some of his theology, you know. And then you have also some of these charismatics, especially in North America, some of these charismatics who don't come from very educated background. They are not highly educated. They are charismatic preachers, very famous, very good speakers. They come to Indonesia, many of them came. And they'll teach you all sorts of ideas. The spirit of anger, the spirit of adultery, the spirit of, you understand or not? Right? They don't, they base their theology on experience. They don't go back to the Bible. So that's why I think Pak Agus is right. The Bible is holistic. So I say to people, I say, it is important for us to recognize the supernatural, the demonic, but go back to the Bible and talk and look at what the Bible actually teaches. If the Bible teaches this, fine, go ahead. If the Bible does not teach this, well, maybe this is your experience, but don't say that you must do it that way.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think I still remember about the territorial spirit. Yeah, some time ago.
You read that, right?
Yeah, quite popular sometimes. Now the next question is to Dr. Hua. This is in Indonesia. I will read it first, then I translate it. Ketika misionari datang di masa lampau, hampir semua budaya dihilangkan. Misalnya ibadah gereja Batak saat ini sangat mirip dengan ibadah di Eropa. Apakah menurut Bapak kita perlu mereklaim atau membangkitkan budaya yang hilang itu? Bagaimana kalau nilai-nilai budaya tersebut banyak yang bertentangan dengan iman Kristen? When the missionaries in the past came to Indonesia, they removed almost all the local culture. For example, Batak church worship service today is very similar to the European liturgies. Do you think we need to reclaim or revive our lost culture? If so, what if the cultural value conflict with our Christian faith, and what can we do about it?
I think there are times when our cultural values conflict with the Christian faith. And those things need to be thrown away. For example, when the missionaries went to India, they say the practice of sati, where if the husband dies, they cremate the body, but they also take the girl, the woman, the widow, and the widow must be cremated live. Right? You understand me or not? So that's and the British rightly say no, stop it. And so even today now, you don't hear the practice. So if a culture conflicts with what is right and true, we have to say that. But unfortunately, when the missionaries came, the tendency for them was that everything in your culture is demonic, is bad. So almost everything was thrown away. And so we did not learn to recover. what's the best in a culture. I think the challenge today is this, and I want to draw your attention to one verse in the Bible, in the book of Revelations, chapter 21 or 22, where he says that in the new city of Jerusalem, the kings will bring what is good in their nations, and everything that's good will be brought into the city of God. In other words, the kings will bring what is good. Everything that's good will be brought into the new holy city. And take Indonesia. I told you, you got dance, you got music, you got your angklung. I've heard when I was a university student, I first heard your angklung bands, when the whole people, I say, wow, that's wonderful music. And why do we do that? Why we sing the way that Americans are singing? Shouting, banging gospel, banging the drums all the time? That's not, I don't think it's music. I think it's just a lot of noise. So why don't you recover what is the best? Can I just show you a picture that I have, that I use for my second edition of my book? I'm going to show it to you, a share screen. Can I do it?
Yeah, sure. So this is not bananas or mangoes anymore.
Can you see this picture? Can you all see
it? Yes.
Now, can you all recognize the picture?
Water buffaloes, farmers.
Yes. What else?
There's a Christmas, right? There's Christmas.
Christmas scene.
Oh, the nativity.
Joseph and Mary.
Oh, right? Okay.
It's about Joseph and Mary. And it's not just about the shepherds, but it's about Indonesian buffaloes.
Yeah.
You get my point? And you look carefully, I think these are the wise men. And the wise men. Can you see the point I'm making?
Oh, yes.
Now,
yeah.
Why can't we have such art? You speak much more powerfully to your Indonesians. I think this picture was painted by Indonesian artists. And you got such beautiful music. Take that. Retrieve that. That's my plea to you. Thank you.
The next one, to both of you. What is the biggest weaknesses of the theological education and churches here in doing contextualization? What are some urgent issues facing our time today in Asia that need to be addressed?
My standpoint is always positive. I don't like to pinpoint the weaknesses of everything. There's so many weaknesses. My perspective is positive in terms of like this. Doing contextualization is important, but also dangerous. Yeah, important and dangerous. So it is a homework for those teams who need to do it. Because once we don't prepare and ready to do that, we can slip to syncretism. We can slip to syncretism, and their message can be damaged. So I think it is a work for those for the team, whoever the team, they need to be prepared and ready to do that. You cannot just put something out of the culture and then put it into the church without thinking, without evaluating it from the biblical perspective. Related to the other religions and cultures, there are so many encounters. It's like a triangle. You can have an interaction here at the top or in the middle at the bottom. So the syncretism mostly is done in the bottom. So people can put everything in the prayer, in the worship without thinking about it. And that's the first thing, that we need to have responsible in doing contextualization. The second thing is that culture are changing so fast. So to which culture we contextualize something. So for instance, if you go to Jakarta and then we put something from the remote areas and put it contextualized in the worship in the Jakarta, for instance, nobody will come. Yeah. So contextualization will work. It is not steady. It's not a complete works. It's always a changing world. We need to develop it each time. So its period, its paradigm, its situation is different. So for instance, I'm not concentrating myself studying one particular areas in Indonesia, and it's interesting for me because now I studied also the culture and everything. What can we bring to them in terms of Christianity and also in terms of custom, in terms of many regular things in their lives. And it's very interesting. One point, the last point is that know yourself. We are very rich. Indonesian is very rich. Asian is very rich. God give us a lot in Indonesia, in Asia. So if we doing our works, I think gradually, because contextualization will take next time. We cannot contextualize something in a short period of time. It takes time for people to understand it, to swallow it. We cannot just give them, choke them to their mouth. We cannot do that. So it takes time. The important thing is that we have institution, we have people, team that work out this in our context. That's the most important now. Thank you.
But I know that our time is moving on. So I guess, as I say, I agree with Agus, and I just want to say this. In theological education, part of the reason why we find difficult to contextualize is because our textbooks are all largely written by the West, and all we do is we translate them. Now, I think Indonesians, we in Asia, are now having to produce our own. So, for example, under John Stott's ministry, they have started what's called Langham Publishing, and increasingly now they're encouraging the publishing, the development of textbooks for Africa, for Asia, for the Chinese. So, for example, right now they're working on a Chinese Bible commentary, which will address the Chinese word in China. So these are the sort of things that we must work on. And so those of us who's got opportunity, we must make an attempt to write the textbooks and all that as much as possible. I think that's the first thing. But I want to say secondly is that contextualization does not only need to be done by scholars. Many, for example, there are journalists, there are people who are writers, there are historians. They don't need to be theologians. For example, as I said, there are many important people in your Indonesian history that you need to understand. It's because you see, all of us need heroes. When we look at somebody's life who challenges me, I feel encouraged. Now, where are your Indonesian heroes? Now, for example, I ask people, Petrus Octavianus, one of the great leaders of the Indonesian revival. But I know of no single good biography on him, not even in Indonesian. And this is what is needed to be. And that one doesn't need a theologian to write. He can be a good journalist, a good storyteller, a good history teacher. Go and dig up the facts and write a story that inspires. I don't know. And sometimes we forget this is so important. And so we start looking all over. But we can actually focus on our own stories, our own history, how God worked in Jakarta, how among the Bataks, in East Timor, among the Moluccas people, how God worked. And there are a lot of wonderful stories. If we can retrieve those stories, it helps us to understand how Christianity can be much more rooted in Indonesia. And I think that, and I've also, thirdly, I said, it can be done in your worship. Don't just follow a Western style worship. You got great music, you got wonderful dance, you got poetry. Retrieve those and use it for your worship.
Maybe we are so busy working, nobody writes about us.
Part of the problem is,
we're so busy working now.
Can I just tell you a story? Agus, do you remember Manun Sang, who was from India, in Trinity, your time doing a doctorate?
Manun Sang? I heard about it.
You remember him? You know,
I was there personally, but I know about it.
You heard about him. His family was with him. He was at Trinity College. He came to do a doctorate. I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. After 1 year there, he finally came to my office. He said, Dr. Hua Yung, can you help me? I spent 1 year trying to find a topic to write my PhD. I said, what have you been doing? He said, I find this, look at this. I want to write on Luther. Actually, everybody tells me I cannot do it. So I asked him a simple question. Has somebody written up the history of your church in Northeast India? He said, no, there's no proper history written. I said, why don't you write out a history? He said, when I first came here, that's what I wanted to do, but I was told I cannot do that for a PhD. I said, oh, Lama, what's happening to us? He wants to write a history of his own church, and he tells that he cannot be a PhD. And finally, he got his PhD. He wrote on the history of his own church in
Northeast
Nagaland.
India.
Yeah.
So I was so happy for him. So that's what we need to do. There are many stories that you got in Indonesia. Please write that up.
Yeah.
You enrich not just yourself, but the whole world.
True. But that's really need a huge transformation of the scholars, Dr. Wayung, because at the end, this is not a storybook, this is PhD dissertation, right? They usually will think about that.
You are a seminary. You should be produce such people, okay?
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sutrisna is here. Pak Agus Gunawan is here. So everybody, all the leaders are here. So thank you so much, Dr. Wayung, for reminding us. Okay, Dr. Sarina, it's 11. It's more than it's 11:05 now.
I just want to summarize in 2 sentences. To contextualize, we need to understand our text very well, and then to understand our context. And the second is that contextualization is not just for scholars, theologian, and pastor or missionary, but actually is for all Christians. So this is also one of the tasks of the church, to equip the congregation from all kind of profession, to help them to understand the text and the context, and help them to contextualize in their own context of work and life. That's all. Thank you, Dr. Wayung.
May I just make one addition? I've talked
yes, please give your last remarks for all of us, Dr. Wayung.
I've talked a lot about context, but I do want to come back again and again to the text. I plead with us that we must master the Bible's message. That is going to require a lot of hard work. If we don't master the Bible's message, as Agus say, we're going to go into heresy.
Correct.
A lot of the non-evangelical, ecumenical writers, right, and in Asia, they do a lot of contextualizing, but their theology is bad because they don't root it. It's not rooted in the Bible's message. So that's why I feel it's very important that we hold on to the Bible's message, really master it. Then we can do our contextualization well.
True, indeed. I couldn't agree more. So, Pak Agus, how about you? The last remarks from Pak Agus?
Yeah, there are a lot of homeworks. One last thing that I'm thinking about how to contextualize the gospel to the next generation. There's a lot of work to be done because their culture are changing also. We have this generation, that there's a lot of work. So my last question, remarks is that we need to cooperate. We need to collaborate.
Yeah.
The thing that we need to do.
Collaborate. Yes. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Wayung. Thank you so much, Pak Agus.